and I'll let you. Hey everybody, it's Lloyd and Dan with Salesheros again. Welcome aboard. Dan, how are you today?
Good morning, Lloyd. Coming to you this morning from somewhere between Jefferson City and Columbia, Missouri, visiting some friends and family out here. So it's a lot colder right now than I'm used to in Puerto Rico, that's for sure.
What is your weather there right now?
Well, it's clear and sunny, but it's cold. I think it's under 40 right now. It'll probably warm up today, close to 60 or 70, but I'm not, in Puerto Rico, it's 84 degrees all day long, every day.
I was going to ask you, how did you get down to Puerto Rico? You're from San Francisco, right?
Yeah, born and raised in San Francisco. Yeah.
How did you get from San Francisco to Puerto Rico?
Well, so when we started the company, we actually formulated, we were in San Diego at the time. We were empty nesters and our kids were going to school in San Diego. So we moved down there, and that was at the same time that I founded WebPres Videos. And so we did that for about first 6 years, and then moved back to San Francisco. And at that time, Puerto Rico, as most people know, is economically depressed, and they instituted these tax incentives called Act 20, Act 22 to incentivize businesses to relocate to the island. And we qualified, WebPres Videos qualified, and so we were given a tax incentive to move down here. And of course, I've always had a proclivity for living in the Caribbean, and what a great opportunity. And that's what we did. 2016, it's been 6 years now since we got down to Puerto Rico. Yeah.
And so did you go down there? I don't remember when that big storm was there in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, it was that was Maria, and it was 2018, I guess. So
yes, we were a couple of years.
Yeah, we were already there a couple of years, but fortunately for us, we were in Cabo San Lucas at a wedding when the storm hit, and so we called back. There was tough to get any information, but our friends just told us, "Hey, don't come back. It's a disaster. You don't want to be here." And fortunately, we still had a home in California, so we just went to California for 5 months. We didn't go back to the island until the power grid had been restored and water and all of that stuff. So we really never experienced the adversity of the hurricane, which was pretty devastating. It really was. Not in our area so much.
Listen, most people would not be able to get that phone call and just go to their other home in California and leave everything behind. I mean, you make it sound like this is just a normal thing. Like the average family says, "Oh, everything's blown apart. Yeah, what the hell? We'll go to our other house."
Yeah, right.
I mean, you have to have a certain kind of personality to be able to do that, I think.
Well, everything was just so fortunate for us. We weren't on the island when it happened. We were already on the West Coast. We just flew back to our home in California. And yes, we recognized how fortunate we were. I mean, there were friends of ours, our neighbors, literally had to hire a private helicopter to get them and their kids and the dogs and everything off the island, because there was no commercial flights whatsoever. So people were they were hiring boats to take them to Florida, or private airplanes to get them off the island. And it was very hectic, and we didn't have to deal with that. So we were fortunate. I don't want to digress with our audience, but it's an interesting story because it worked out for us. We were very fortunate in every respect.
So how was your week this past week?
Good. You know, I had an interesting, we introduced a new video titled IUL versus qualified plans because we'd gotten so much demand from our customers saying, you know, that this is what they're spending a lot of time on. IUL is a tax-free retirement vehicle compared to
Index
typical
universal
qualified.
life policy. Index universal
Yeah,
life policy, right?
yeah, index universal life. And so we have a lot of videos on index universal life as a retirement vehicle or deferred compensation or whatever. But it was brought to our attention, and of course, you and I have both had this experience too, that the best way to sell something like that is to compare it with what they have, particularly if what they have is somewhat problematic. So the problem that we're presented with in qualified plans is that the tax deferral is only temporary, and that ultimately not only are you going to pay tax on the money you put in, but you're going to pay tax on all the money you grew or what it grew to when you retire. So the solution to that is a life insurance policy where the money can be withdrawn or taken out tax exempt. But the best way to do that is a side-by-side comparison. You know, here's what you've got in your qualified plan, and here's how it compares with the IUL. And so we did a video on, you should be doing a side-by-side comparison, and there's software programs out there that will do all the calculations for you so that you can, you know, whether you're on a laptop or you're projecting on a screen in your office, you can demonstrate to somebody, hey, you know, what are you earning? What's your statement say? What are you earning? What are you paying in fees? How much are you projected to have at whatever time? Let's take your numbers and let's compare them side by side with the IUL. So we put that out there and everybody said, oh, great video. We love it. Very useful. But what software programs should we use? And, you know, that we're not in the business. We don't ever reference or recommend any particular product or service or company. But there were a few that some of our customers says, oh, I use this, or I've tried this, whatever. So we made some recommendations, and almost for all those who gave us a report back on it, they all said the same thing. This software the numbers are good, but it's so complicated, not to use so much. It was complicated for our customers to understand, our prospects to understand. You know, there's too many numbers on the page and too many colors, and you know, they get lost, and I'm trying to point something out and they're reading something else. So this week was sort of dominated by talking with our customers about their quandary in the software, the comparison software that's available. Have you used it, or do you recommend any sort of software applications that compare products side by side or compare solutions side by side?
Well, it's funny that you had that experience because I do a coaching class on Tuesdays, and I had 19 people on it. And one of the things I was going over was 7 technologies that financial advisors should use. And one of the technologies I was talking about was illustration software. So I think the problem that agents and advisors run into, you know, well, 2 things. First of all, if you're face to face, even if you're working from home like we are now with your customers, you know, the mind can only comprehend what the rear can endure. And so what happens is the prospect either listens with logic or listens with emotion. But when they listen to us, they're not really listening to rule us in, they're listening to rule us out. And so when we ask them questions, they tend to want to reject us because they're used to being sold to. So they think we're trying to sell them something.
Right.
So so that's one thing. The second problem is agents and advisors, I think, get caught up in the weeds, right? So one of the ways that advisors feel valuable and feel useful and feel like that they're bringing value to the client is to show the client how much knowledge they have.
Yeah.
And the prospect's eye is just interested in all those details. They don't really get why all those details are going to be problems for them down the road. So a decent illustration software helps them visualize it and kind of personalizes it. And there's a lot of platforms out there. I mean, I talked about 3 of them. I don't know if there's any one that's greater than the other. I mean, so I'll tell you the name of the 3: the eMoney, Money Guide Pro, and Retirement View. But you know, one of the things I told the advisors in the class I had on Tuesday is don't get, and you know what happens is, because advisors really want to impress the client, they think that more information is better.
Yes.
So they sign, and you know, the easiest person to sell is a salesperson, right? We're all gullible.
Yeah.
So salespeople sign up. They go to these live events where vendors present their platform to the advisor, and then the advisor buys on emotion, and then they get home, they log into the platform, and they realize there's all these bells and whistles that they don't know how to use. And honestly, they don't take enough time to learn the platform that they just paid for to figure out all the bells and whistles. So they use what they're comfortable with, and they stay away what they're not comfortable with. And then the first time they use it with a prospect, if they get pushback, then they say it's like a lead. You know, I always tell managers here's the problem with giving your agents leads, is if the agent calls the lead, makes an appointment, goes out to the house or does a Zoom meeting and makes a sell, they come back and tell you, hey, that was a great lead. But if they call the lead and make a presentation and don't make a sell, they come back and tell you that lead sucked.
Yeah, right.
They don't say, I didn't ask questions, I wasn't engaging, I didn't sell the problem they had, I was pushing them. You know, they don't take any ownership or responsibility over their failure in the process. And the same thing happens with the software. So, you know, when you sign up for an illustration software, if you sign up with all the bells and whistles, and you don't get interaction from your prospect right away, and more importantly, you don't get a sell right away, then you probably don't log in again.
Yeah.
And so I told the advisors on Tuesday that 2 things you need to evaluate about any illustration software. The 2 things: is it relatable? In other words, is it simple and easy to input the numbers? And is the image on the screen something that your prospect can look at and relate with, like that? I mean, like that. If they need you to spend 30 minutes explaining what they're looking at, or if you print out a 30-page report, you're never going to get the business. And then the second thing is, don't get software that has so many bells and whistles you're never going to use it.
Yeah.
And it reminds me, I did a training for a call center for a broker dealer in Indiana a couple of years ago. And on their website, they promoted the fact that they have 50 carriers. Like, we have 50 insurance carriers.
Right.
And I had some health problems, and I probably shouldn't even have gone and done the presentation because I wasn't healthy enough to do it. But my ego got in front of me. My ego got in front of my common sense. So I'm standing here in front of these people, and the owner of the company sitting there, and I made this comment. I said, you know, like on your website, you advertise that you got 50 carriers. Agents don't care. They only care about the product that they're going to make money on this week. So when you talk to them and you tell them we have 50 carriers, their eyes glaze over.
Yeah.
They only care about the product that they're selling this week. What can they make money on this week? They want you to tell them, here's what people are buying and here's the commission we're going to give you. And it's the same thing with.
I just want to interrupt because I think it's an interesting point. It used to, in the life insurance business, and even to a certain extent in the annuity business, the value of a broker, a GA or an IMO in having all these accounts was that, hey, look, you might want to place your business with this certain carrier, but if you have some health conditions or some occupational or lifestyle conditions, that may not be the right one. We may have to shop it out. And that was what it always was. Well, we have to shop it out to get the best deal. And we have 50 different companies that we can shop with. So the agent would say, well, you know, you're the broker. that's great because I want to get my client the best rate. So having a number of options used to be, and maybe it still is, I don't know. Is it still a benefit for the agent to come in and say, hey, shop this out for me and get my client the best deal?
Well, I'm not saying that as you know, I don't want to be misunderstood here. I know I was that day. I shouldn't have been there that day. I just had some heart problems and I never should have gone. But I don't want to be misunderstood. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have a lot of carriers and a lot of products.
Yeah.
You should. But that should not be your hook.
Right.
For one thing, and this is going to sound sarcastic, but I'm a little sarcastic this way. I think I've earned the right. It's 2022. How many carriers are online?
Yeah.
I mean, I can go to Google and find like 9,999 carriers.
Yeah.
But if I'm an agent, what I want you to tell me is here's how we can help you make money.
Absolutely.
In fact, these are the prospects that are buying right now, and here's what they're buying.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean when I'm talking about the illustration software with the agent.
Right.
For the agent to sign up for an illustration software because it has all these bells and whistles. And I mean, some of them are really, I mean, you almost need to be a CPA to use the dang thing.
Yeah.
Which is good. But my counsel to you is go partner up with a CPA.
Yeah.
And then the software is worth it. The software, the illustration software, when I was a producing agent and selling a lot of annuities, here's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to have my client enter their data and look on the screen, and just by the looking on the screen, know exactly where they're at and where they're going to be.
Yeah.
And here's why illustration software is really good. You know, people like two things, right? They like to hear their name and they like to have their opinion asked.
Yep.
And when you flip the laptop around and have them enter their data in, which makes sense, right?
Yeah.
You can't get good results out of an illustration software if the data's not entered in there. Well, here's my question. Where do people get the data from?
Yeah.
They get it from their 401k statement. They get it from their IRA statement. They get it from their bank statement. They get it from their financial records.
Right.
Now, how many times as an advisor have you asked people questions about their assets and they're hesitant to provide the information, or they don't want to get up and go look for it because they think you're trying to sell them something?
Yeah.
But you
That's a really go ahead. No. Continue, because that is, in my opinion, that's the crux of a lot of the problems we as salespeople face, is that we don't engage the prospect in their information. And you know, I got to a point where I was starting. Of course, I was doing more business and estate planning at that time. But I got to the point where I wanted your financial statement. And so business owners always have a financial statement and they could get that. A lot of individuals don't have a financial statement, maybe more so today because it's more accessible. But I would say if you don't show me your income and expense statement, your personal budget, I can't find the problem for you. You can tell me what you're concerned about, but I need to look at your numbers in order to, it's like a doctor, you know, you got to do a medical exam and you go in and you complain, like, you know, you go in and you complain and say, oh, I've got this chronic stomach ache or whatever. And he's checking your pulse and your temperature and your heart. You go, why are you looking at those things? I have a stomach problem. We say, because I got to know all about your body, right? Well, it's the same thing as salespeople. You need to have a holistic perspective on your prospect in order to zero in on the problem. Because, you know, they may say, I'm really concerned about, preserving my wealth for the next generation. And, you know, the first thing is, well, how much wealth do you have and what's it held in? You know, if I don't know that, I can't tell you how to protect it.
What do you consider wealth, right?
Yeah. What is your wealth and where is it and why are you concerned about it? Show me on your balance sheet or show me on your income statement. And when you do that now, and you're right, you know, a lot of people, unless there's a good relationship, unless you have a good relationship and respect between the agent and the prospect, they're not going to show you their financial statement.
Right.
But that's the first clue, isn't it? That you don't have a good trust relationship. If they're saying, no, you give me your pitch, give me your pitch and I'll tell you whether it's of interest to me. You say, well, I don't work that. Yeah, no doctor would say, to the patient would come in and say, okay, doc, give me your pitch. Tell me what's wrong with me. And the doctor goes, how am I supposed to know if I don't do an examination? Right? So as advisors and agents, if we don't go in with a more holistic perspective, and like you say, asking the right questions and asking them to divulge personal financial information, if you're not willing to do that, I can't help you.
Yeah, I mean, imagine, part of the reason that they don't want to disclose that information to you is because they don't want to be sold, right?
Well, you know what? In the cognitive sciences, a lot of the research that we've seen, especially by Robert Cialdini, people don't want to discuss their financial situations typically for two reasons. One, it's very private. It's kind of like healthcare, but the reason they don't is they feel they're going to be judged. So, we have, especially right now, you have a lot of baby boomers who don't want to disclose their financial information because they're embarrassed. They didn't save enough money. They just said, well, I'm 3 years from retirement and I've got less than $500,000. And the agent may say, well, if you got $500,000, I can work with that. I can maximize it for you. But they may just say, I think everybody else my age has 2 or 3 million. And so I don't want to show you how incompetent I've been in saving for retirement. So that either that's the problem, or they do have a lot of money and they don't want people to know that they're wealthy or that they have that much money. And so it's mostly an insecurity reason why they don't want to disclose it, which, going to sort of the fundamentals of the way you coach salespeople on developing the relationship, it's really all about that relationship. Until you are liked and respected and trusted, you can't really do your job. I mean, if you're just going to go in and sell an annuity or sell life insurance, but your relationship is going to be more like a car dealer, or like any other vendor. You're just there to provide the transaction. But if you really want to help somebody, just like a doctor does, you need to take a holistic perspective. Even when you go in with your heart condition, the doctor's asking about other things. How's your blood pressure? How's your stomach? How's your anxiety? How's your stress level? They all play into your heart condition. And as financial advisors, that's, I see so many financial advisors who are fixated on gathering assets under management. And then they disregard the wealth preservation or the protection against taxation, or, what other issues do we have? What you have special interests, special issues with your children or special interests with your business partners. All of those things are part of your wealth management. And if you're not asking questions, and if you don't have the trust and the relationship with that client, you're really not, you may be perfectly happy getting the assets under the management and walking away from the rest of it. But if you are truly a financial planner or a financial advisor, just like a medical doctor or a business consultant, you need to have a holistic perspective. And I think that's what makes, and I'm going to let you comment on this, I think that's what makes the sales profession so much more difficult for agents and advisors, is that they're not focused on the relationship. They're focused on the transaction.
Yeah, and I think you make some excellent points there. It made me think of two things. One thing that illustration software does for you, well, there's a few things it does for you. It stretches you in terms of your professional skills.
Yes.
Because most illustration software has questions about things like 401k and IRAs and 72Ts and stuff like that. They have questions about that. And as an advisor, if you're not that familiar with it and you're going to use the software, then the first time you get a client that has a question about that, you'll learn pretty quick that you have to figure out how that works.
Right.
But the second thing that the illustration software does for you is that it engages the prospect. So imagine being able to say to a prospect after you've done the meet and greet, and you've asked the questions about what problems they're having, what problems they want to solve. Imagine being able to say, most of my clients have most of their financial information in their tax records. Are you like that?
Yes.
Like most of your financial records. So I don't need to see your tax records, but here's what you can do. Imagine flipping that laptop around and showing them a previous client, blacking their name out, right?
Right.
Show a previous client and say, if you get your tax return from last year, and let's just enter the numbers from the first page and get a baseline of where you're at, and slide the laptop towards them. If you got the husband and wife sitting there, and one of them gets up and goes and gets their tax return,
yeah,
I'm not sure, but when I went to sales school with Combined Insurance Company and learned W. Clement Stone's method, like 35 years ago, I think that's called a tail, right?
Yeah.
And that's incentive selling.
Yes.
Because you incentivize them to get involved. And it's kind of like the old days where you used to put the pen on top of the signature card.
Right. And then push it across the table to them.
And just say, I need your John Hancock. And you watch which one picked the pen up.
Yeah.
Because the buyer always picks the pen up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's kind of like doing that. So illustration software gives you an inanimate object to interact with the prospect, but it also stretches you as a sales professional to learn more stuff. And most of your clients are not going to have all the financial wherewithal and
they're not going to have the numbers. They're not going to have the numbers in their head. Most.
Yeah, but even that's true. But the word I was looking for is they're not going to have all the complexity that the software is going to be able to address.
Oh, of course, right.
So you just don't get overwhelmed with the complexity of the software. And I wanted to go back to something you said about the advisors, that just want to get their money under management, and they let the rest of it go.
Mm-hmm.
So this is 2022, and in 2022, where agents and advisors have more technology available to you, if you're the advisor, and I'm looking at you, if you're the advisor that goes in and you're only concerned about money under management and all that other peripheral stuff just is too petty and small for you, go ahead and make up a sign that says agents welcome and leave that for your prospect to put in the window.
Yeah.
So when the next guy like me shows up at the house, he's actually trained by somebody like me or Dan.
Yeah.
And learns how to ask the question and finds the money that people are spending. And I want to tell you what this money's called. It's called anyway money.
Why do you call it anyway money?
Because they're spending the money anyway. Right?
Okay.
They have a travel accident plan. They have a cancer plan that's going to terminate when they turn 65 years old. They've got a dormant 401k plan or a dormant IRA plan. They've got child life insurance policies they took out when their kids when they were 5 years old, and the kids are now 40 years old now.
Right.
They've got $300, $400, $500, $600 a month, or $2,000 or $3,000 a year they're spending on stuff that they don't need. They've got products that Medicare covers anyway that they can let go of and reposition that money to pay for their Medicare supplement. When you do something like that and show them how to reposition money that they're spending anyway, to pick up a product that they thought they were going to have to find new money out of their monthly disposable income to pay for, they all of a sudden look at you like, well, this guy knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
And so when you talk to them about, it's kind of like the clients who say that, I've got 25,000, I've got 50,000 in a CD account. What do you have? Do you mind if I ask why you have that money in a CD account? Well, I have it in there for emergencies. Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Well, that makes sense. We need to have some money in case we get a leak, a microwave goes bad, alternator goes out in the car. I got that. Let me ask you this. In the last 5 years, how often have you accessed that money as a result of an emergency? And they say, well, I never have.
Yeah.
Well, here's a clue. That 50,000 should be sitting in an annuity because they can get 15% out every year with no penalties.
Mm-hmm.
And the money that's sitting in a CD account is getting what, 0.8, maybe 1.5% interest on it. And
Maybe.
inflation is what, 7.9%?
Yeah. Right. You're
So
losing value. Yeah.
you can at least put the brakes. When you talk to them that way, then they're starting to have an inward look at the impact of the decisions that they haven't paid attention to.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the decisions that are harmful to our prospects are past decisions, not current decisions.
Yeah.
Now, if I tell you the truth today, and I take the scales down from your eyes today and walk out and you don't do anything with me, then the problem you're going to have tomorrow and 5 years from now and 10 years from now is a result of today's decision.
Mm-hmm.
But where you're at today is a direct impact, a direct consequences of past decisions.
Right.
And so people can only do three things, right? People can only do things. They can think, they can feel, and they can behave. That's the only three things people can do. And so we have to talk to them about what they were thinking in the past that caused them to make that decision. So we have to talk to them about the three things that they can do. And
Mm-hmm.
illustration software gives you an inanimate object to focus that on. It's kind of like walking in someone's house, or when someone gets on the Zoom and say, "Oh, you play guitar," right?
Yeah.
That's a way to build the relationship.
Right.
Used to, we would walk in the house, we'd say, "Hey, I see you bowl. I see your kids go here. I see your kids are in swimming. I see you golf. Was that you fishing in that picture?" And people
Mm-hmm.
would disclose that kind of information. The illustration software gives you a focus of conversation and gives your clients a reason to interact. And if your client is hesitant to disclose information, being able to say to them, "I don't need the information," relieves the pressure. It's like a teapot that starts going off, and you just flip the top of it off and let the steam out, and it quits making the noise, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when I say to you, "I don't need the information," you can enter the information here. That relieves the pressure off of it.
Yeah. I want to talk about a technique that you mentioned and then kind of went past it. But I know that you're really a strong proponent and an advocate, as am I, of storytelling, right?
Right.
And so one of the things that you accomplish with your illustration software, you gave an example, is where you turn it around and you say, "Let me show you an example of what I've done for another client or what someone else has done." So psychologically, here's what happens. You have allowed the client to feel like, okay, now I'm not the focus. Okay, now we're focusing on somebody else's.
Right.
And let me see what you did for somebody else. And so now they can vicariously or empathize with, okay, well, here's what this client did. Here's what their home value was. Here's what their net worth was. Here's what their portfolio was. Mine's higher or mine's lower, or whatever. But they're just looking at, okay, and then the illustration shows it. And then this is what I was able to do in this case with an IUL. Here's what I was able to do.
Right.
So now two things happen. They see that as a story. You just told a story of someone else, and they're able to see that and relate to it or resonate with it. But more importantly, what people like to see is that's an example of what you can do for me. And now that trust is built up because they say, "Oh, well, you've done this before, and here's how it worked for someone else." And everybody wants to know, when it comes to finances, this is part of the psychology. Everybody wants to know what everybody else is doing.
It's like
You see
reality
these,
TV, right? That's why
yeah.
reality
Well, you
TV is
want
so
to see
popular.
how do I measure up with everybody else? Is my home worth more? Do I have an average net worth? Do I have a high net worth? Do I have a low net worth? But what are other people? What are smart people doing? One of the things that we utilize in our video graphics is, in a lot of more sophisticated concepts, we'll use pictures of physicians, doctors, attorneys, other professionals, business owners, because people will say, "Well, if it's good enough for a doctor," right?
Right.
This is a subjective, unconscious perspective, but they'll see the picture and say, oh, well, if this is the sort of thing that doctors and engineers and attorneys, really smart people, are doing with their money, I should pay attention.
Right.
So again, the illustration software becomes a mechanism for telling a story. It's an example, but that story is a way. If you don't have a story to tell, if you can't come to the client and say, hey, I have a client that was a lot like you, and this is what we did, you can tell that story. But when you use illustration software to demonstrate the numbers, that's very powerful story.
Yeah, I mean, there's an old saying in sales, to illustrate, you demonstrate.
Exactly.
And so what happens is people can argue with advertising. That's why nobody believes advertising, right? But advertisers get enough business from advertising that they pay big stars to promote their products.
Right.
So it's the irony here is that advertisers pay, like the Kardashians to talk about a product on their YouTube channel, but yet most people don't believe advertising.
Yeah.
So when you're talking to a prospect, the great thing about a story is great stories are about people, not things. And the other thing that's great about stories is it's easy for someone that your prospect may disagree with you. They may disagree with your company and they may disagree with the product.
Yeah.
But they won't judge the experience that a client of yours went through.
Yeah.
They will just relate with that experience. And
exactly
like you said, right. They'll relate with that as either I did better than that, I had the same kind of thing, or that's never happened to me. Right. But they'll relate with that experience. So if you can put the threes together, if you can ask questions that are relatable, and then you can illustrate their experience through a story of one of your clients, and then ask them what they would do or what their plans are going forward to either emulate, prevent, or reduce that risk happening to them, then they will start telling you a story of the future. That's why I like to get family dynamics when I talk to people. And the reason I like to get family dynamics is if you tell me in a sales situation, if you tell me about how you took it, like my wife and I, my mother was in Knoxville, Tennessee, had vascular dementia. And for 6-8 months, my wife drove back and forth from Atlanta, Georgia to Knoxville to take care of my mom. Eventually, we had her move in with us. She lived with us the last 2 years of her life, and she died here. She died living with us. And then a couple of years ago, my mother-in-law had pancreatic cancer, and my wife flew out to Arizona, took care of her until she couldn't take care of her anymore there. We actually paid to have an ambulance bring her back here to our house, and then she died in our house of pancreatic cancer. See, people relate to that story.
Absolutely.
But here's the great thing about people telling you that story is they also tell you and demonstrate the emotion they went through in that experience. And now you have a tool.
Yes.
To say to them, when you're 85, how do you want to make sure your kids don't have to go through what you went through with your kids? I had somebody on my coaching call Tuesday that said, actually yesterday I did a session yesterday. It was a different call. I did a session yesterday with people, and one of the agents in the text said, long-term care is hard to sell. And I said, maybe, or maybe you're selling the wrong thing. Because if I told you, if I'm a 50-year-old and I just told you that story about my mom or my mother-in-law, you're an idiot if you don't put me emotionally in that age group of my mother when she died and ask me what experience I want my kids to have with me. Do I want them to go through the same? My mother-in-law died in the bedroom upstairs on the 3rd floor. We had the visiting nurse call the funeral home that we pre-arranged with. You get the pre-arranged part of that. Called them, and the guy said on the phone, I swear to God, this is saying the truth. The guy said on the phone, well, I'm the only one on duty right now. Is there someone there that can help me carry the remains down the stairs?
Wow.
And I knew my wife was freaked out by her mother being dead in the room. And I said, I will. And my wife said, hell no, you're not doing that. You're telling me that's not a story that any agent or advisor can't grab which one of your kids do you want to help carry your remains down the stairs?
Yeah,
None of them.
that's a great point. Psychologists tell us that one of the, maybe even the um, most powerful way that we bind with each other, that we relate to each other, is something called shared adversity. So when people go, this is what creates team fans, when they share the experience of what their team goes through, winning or losing, and relationships, and they share that, it binds them. When a salesperson, a sales professional, I should say, is sharing a story with a prospect, and the prospect is engaged because stories are entertaining and they give insight into the person, the salesperson, just like you did. And then they come back and they share their own story. For example, you would tell somebody and say, "Oh yeah, I had the same," and you'll get the same thing. I could respond the same way. "Oh yeah, my mom had dementia and we did this," and suddenly you and I are the same. We had similar experiences,
We're aligned.
and now the level of trust between the two of us, because we're very similar. We have similar stories, and so the old way that we were taught to break the ice, when you met somebody, like you said, you look at the pictures on the wall and you say, "Oh, is that you, fishing? What did you catch that day?" Or, "Oh, is that your hobby? You're a golfer?" Or, "Oh, is this your family over here, or your dog," or whatever it is. And you break the ice that way. And of course, all consumers now know that that's an icebreaker,
Right.
But better than the icebreaker is storytelling. And because storytelling, especially if it's authentic, storytelling is a way to sort of break through all of the useless chatter that people use to, socially and culturally, to kind of warm things up. But that story goes right to the heart. And if you can and people will respond. I mean, you could be sitting in the stands at a sporting arena and be sitting someone you've never met before. And, something happens on the field and I say, "Oh God, I remember that, that happened 2 weeks ago. And this guy and the coach did this." And they turn around, they go, "Oh yeah, I was here for that play too." Or, "I remember this." Or suddenly you two are bonded. You don't even know each other, but you're talking about things, what's going on right in front of you. But more importantly, psychologists tell us that you're sharing an experience, whether it was a past experience or a current experience, through the storytelling and engagement. You're sharing that experience, and now there's a bond between you that says we're more alike than we are disalike. And that's when the salesperson can now say, "Okay, let's open up. Let's talk about other things that we have in common."
Yeah, I mean, you could even take that a little bit further. You've been at some public event before, right? Like a football game or some public event. And the people sitting in front of you, been really smart or dumb, right?
Right.
Like the guy spills his drink on the girl's lap next to him, right? Or the girl takes the popcorn out of his hand and doesn't give him any. And we comment to the person that, "Hey, did you see that?" And we talk about what they did. And the rest of the game, we think we know them now, right? Well, what's what they do here? What's what they do?
Right. Exactly.
That's just transferring the exact same thing. So if any of this rings true for anybody watching this now or in the future, so here's the thing I want to say to you. You can't tell these kind of stories like Dan and I are talking about. You can't tell these kind of stories unless you get your prospects to tell you stories.
Yeah.
So one of your jobs when you meet with prospects is to collect stories. Collect stories about them, their family, and their experiences.
Yeah.
And catalog those stories so that when a prospect tells you a story, after you validate them, "You got to be kidding. That must have been frustrating. I can't believe you went through that. I've gone through something like that before. I didn't handle it as smart as you did." After you validate them, let me share with you what happened to Alice, a client of mine. She had something similar happen.
Yeah.
And here's what stopped her from doing something about it. And people will listen. We like to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly about other people.
Yes.
And like you said, Dan, people want to feel like that they're doing better than you, even if it's just in the fact that you didn't have the same reaction someone else had.
Right.
But what I like about getting back to illustration software, what I
Yeah.
like about the illustration software is it is a inanimate object that you can make a part of the sales relationship. And I want to compare it to what today in 2022 we would call old school. 2 years ago, I wouldn't say it was old school because we still did this more than we do today. But you get to a house or an office, you sit down with somebody, you grinch, jet, and smile, go through the meet and greet process, and you get to the part of the presentation where you think, because they answered questions, because they seem interested, because they didn't reject you yet, you think you're going to have a sale.
Right.
And you do this, and you turn around, and you reach down in your briefcase, and you bring out the application, and they go, "Whoa, I'm not buying today."
Right. Right.
You just introduced an inanimate object into an existing sales relationship, and you reset it from the beginning again.
Yep.
And
Yep.
all the progress you made, you just lost.
Yeah.
But when you use illustration software, you say, "Let me get out what we're going to use today."
Mm-hmm.
And you open your laptop and you bring it up. And the great thing about illustration software is you can use a low trust question. And the example I give you is a low trust question is imagine, excuse me, imagine you're walking down a mall and there's a lady older than you or a lady really younger than you coming on the other side of the mall. So you're walking down this way, a lady's coming this way. And you cross over to her and say, "Excuse me, how old are you and how much do you weigh?" Would you do that?
No, of course not.
Of course not. Nobody on this call would do that because it's not socially appropriate, right?
Right.
But salespeople would be with somebody for 2.5 minutes and say, "How old are you? How much do you weigh?"
Yeah.
See, that's a high trust question. You have to
Yeah.
earn the right to ask higher trust questions.
Yeah.
A low trust question is, let me ask you a question: what zip code are we in?
Yeah.
If people will tell you what zip code you're in, and you write it down on the application or you enter it on the computer and then sit back, if they don't
Yeah.
stop you from entering it,
Yeah.
you're in the
Yeah.
process.
We're in the process. Yeah.
And by saying most of your financial information is probably on your tax record, right? And they go, "Yeah,"
Mm-hmm.
a little bit hesitant. "Yeah, I don't need it." They
Yeah.
immediately drop their guard. They immediately relax about it.
But so what you're talking about here, Lloyd, is a sales technique, right? A closing technique
A pre-close.
and
It's a trial close.
pre-close. So maybe there are, and I'll defer to you. Maybe there are, different styles. Certainly, everybody has their own personality, their own style. But the style that I developed for me was I didn't bring out the application until the prospect was saying, "Okay, what do we do next?" I
Right.
mean, I wanted them to buy. I didn't want to sell. So
Right.
all of those techniques, I tried them and they were uncomfortable for me. Now, I
Right.
know they're not uncomfortable for all salespeople, and maybe they're better professionals. But for me, it was all about, like you say, it was telling stories, it was identifying a problem, and then getting the client to emotionalize that problem. Why does it bother you? Why does it bother you that your money might not last as long as your retirement? And they would say, "Well, yeah, isn't it obvious? I mean, it would be obvious that if I can't pay my bills or I reach 80 years old and I don't have enough money to, pay my medical expenses, what am I going to do? I'm going to be a street person or whatever." Oh, okay. So now you've gotten your
Right.
prospect to feel the problem. And you say, "Well, there is a way to do that," and using it's called an annuity, and you're guaranteed that will never happen. Okay, well,
Yeah, but
what do we have to do? And now they're saying, "Okay, I want to buy the solution," and then I
but
go,
what you're
"Okay,
saying
well,
is
then I
that
take out the application."
you develop the emotional courage to respect their right to feel uncomfortable.
Exactly. Well, and that's really what, from a psychological standpoint, that's what we're there as a sales professional. My job is to help you solve your problems.
Right.
But you can't solve the problem. And I mean, it's just like in AA, they tell you, you can't get sober if you're not going to admit that you have a drinking problem. Right? So the first thing is you got to admit you have a problem, and what are the ramifications of that problem? How does it make me feel to know that I have no control over my drinking? And as soon as that becomes an emotional issue, now you want to say, well, I don't like feeling bad. I want to feel good. So what do I need to do to feel good? Oh, in the case of your money lasting forever, well, to feel good, you need to buy an annuity, and then you're guaranteed you're never going to run out of money. Okay, that's what I want. Okay, well, here's the application. Now I don't have to play any games by filling out your zip code, because now you're saying, what information do you need in order for me to feel good that I'm never going to run out of money? It's not about, an annuity. It's not about the interest rate. I mean, those are details. But once you get the person to say, this is how my problem makes me feel, and I don't want to feel like that. So what do I need to do? Oh, okay, I have a solution for you. That's professional selling, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're excuse me, you articulated it very well. There's no one technique that works for everybody. We're all different. But as a sales professional, you need to have a plethora of techniques so that you can appropriately interact with every prospect.
That's true.
The way you sell may not work for me, and the way I sell may not work for you with every prospect. But you get some prospects that make buying decisions logically, and you get some prospects that make buying decisions emotionally. If you can't hear in your mind's eye, if you can't hear that this person processes things logically and you respond to everything emotionally, they're not going to relate with you, and you're never going to get anywhere. And the
Well,
converse
that's another interesting. I've had this conversation with quite a few advisors and agents, because we're always told that people make decisions emotionally, and the reality is that is true. However, logic triggers emotion. And so even when I use the example of saying, what are you worried about? Well, I'm worried that you get them to tell a story. Hey, I knew somebody who, when they reached 85 and then the spouse died, and they were sitting there and they lost half their Social Security, and now they didn't have enough money to pay the bills. I don't want to be in that position. Oh, so your concern is that you could run out of money. Yes. Well, why does that concern you? Well, because I don't want to be dependent on my children, you know? Well, what do you mean you don't want to be dependent? It's all in the asking the questions until you get to that emotional. But it's the same thing. I don't care if the guy's a CPA or an engineer or a scientist and they're highly analytical. You say, they might come to the same emotional conclusion through a different manner. They may take a circuitous route by saying, well, if I don't earn at least 7% on average per year, for the rest of my life, then I'm not going to be able to sustain they're using technical terms, they're using the numbers, and you say, well, you can still say, well, what is that? What if you earn 5%? Well, if I own 5%, then it's only going to take me to age 82. And what if I live to 95? Well, what if you do live to 95? Well, I won't have enough money. Well, what if you don't have enough money? Then what? Well, then I'm going to have to call my children, or I'm going to become a ward of the state or whatever. How does that make you feel? Well, what are you, an idiot? It makes me feel horrible, right? I mean, I've had people say, "What are you dense?"
That's what takes the emotional courage to let them feel that. And what you're describing is exactly true. People buy on emotion and they're moved to action by logic.
Yes.
You just illustrated it there. You kept asking questions that brought out the emotion. And then when you faced them with that emotion, logic clicked in and they said, yeah, I need to do something about it.
Yeah.
People buy on emotion, but they're moved to action by logic. And if we don't understand that, and we can't we can't work with their personality and we can't relate with our personality, you're not going to get the. But go back to the illustration software.
Yeah,
the
right.
illustration software gives you that bridge.
Yeah, agreed.
There's nothing like watching a prospect enter the data, and like one of the programs, maybe I'll reach out to him. His name's Tim Turner. He owns Toward Technology. Maybe I'll ask him to come on the call with us next week if he would. But like one of the software programs, it actually has a graph, and it goes from green to yellow to red.
Mm-hmm.
And when it hits red, that means you're out of money. And it's funny to watch people enter the data.
Yeah.
Because as that graph changes, like you don't really have to say anything.
Right.
You get the privilege. It's like watching it's like watching a terror TV show. One of the horror TV shows. Because you don't even have to tell them red. Red.
No, you see the expression on their face.
Yeah, green means you got money. Yellow means you're running out. Red means you got no money. And make sure your daughter-in-law is on speed dial, right?
Yeah, right.
Don't tick her off at the family dinner.
Yeah.
And as they enter the information, you see them like start looking at each other.
Yeah.
That's the greatest thing, because you can ask them, so what's going on? What do you see happening?
Yeah.
And they start telling you. There's nothing better when they start telling you.
Yes.
Well, it looks like, what does this mean here? Does this mean I'm going to run out of money again? Well, where are you?
So,
how old are you there? Now, at that age, are you expecting to still be in this house? Now I can start asking you behavior questions, right?
Yeah.
Now I can put you in that position.
And that's, maybe this software, the 3 software programs that you recommend or that you like, to me, one of the key components that I've seen in bad software is that it's complicated. Even if there's bad illustration that doesn't allow the prospect to enter their information. The agent has to enter it all, and that kind of puts the prospect to the side. That's not good, right?
Puts them in a subservient position to you,
right? And then the other thing is when the data comes up on the screen, like you said, if you're seeing this graph and it's a dynamic graph, they're watching it, and they can see. It's real simple to see. Green is you're good, yellow it's serious, and then red now it's game over.
This. Any agent or advisor looking at this, I promise you this: if you have to explain what they're looking at,
bingo,
you just gave them one of the 4 common objections, which is I want to think about it.
Yes.
Because when you get done, they're going to say, I want to think about it.
Yeah, if they
don't say to you, what do I do to prevent that? If the illustration doesn't elicit the response, what do I do to prevent that? Then they're going to say, I want to think about it. And here's how they're going to couch it to you. You did a great job. Nobody's explained it to us like this before.
Yeah.
You've helped us understand this better than anybody. I really appreciate it. And if we buy, we're buying from you.
Yeah.
And now for the next 3 weeks, when you or your staff tries to get them on the phone, they ain't going to get on the phone.
Right.
And then when you do talk to them, you're going to find out that you educated them just enough to buy from somebody else.
So I want you to follow up on that. So, because we're sharing this with other sales professionals. So what sort of illustration software do you want, or how do you prevent that problem? And the way you prevent it, just like you said, is for them to see clearly and explicitly, without any interpretation, without asking the agent to explain anything. That software program has got to display that in layman's terms so that they understand it without any explanation or interpretation. And most of the software I have seen does not do that. I mean, for certain, if you use an insurance company's illustration software, that's horrible. Never use that. It's just, you may have to leave it with the client. They won't read it.
And if they want you to pay for it, you need to ask them, what is the utilization? In other words, of the agents that have access to that, how many log into it on a monthly basis? Because what you'll find out is nobody logs into it.
Right.
So if the agents aren't going to use it, it doesn't matter how many bells and whistles they have. I'll talk to Tim. What would be great about having Tim come on? Tim will tell us what problems agents have using software.
Yeah.
Not just his, but just in general. He's been doing this for.
Can we get him on? Can we get him to
I
come
think
on?
so. I'll reach out to him and see about it.
Okay.
Because I think what's important is to understand if you're not going to use it, don't waste your money on it.
Yeah.
Don't.
Yeah.
That would be. I mean, we've been on for a long time. Maybe we need to. The mind can only comprehend what the rear can
Yeah.
endure.
Right. Right.
People go, but if you're not going to use it, don't waste your money on it.
Yeah.
But no matter what and people always talk about the cost of it. I'll tell you that the cost of it is about 25% of your average commission on a $100,000 annuity.
Yeah.
So if you're getting 3%, that's $3,000. Then that software is going to cost you $750 to $1,000.
Yeah.
On average, that's about what it's going to run you. And if that deters you from doing it, and I don't sell software, so I'm not promoting software, but if that deters you from doing it, you are the one that needs to buy it, because you will never get that 100,000, that 500,000, that $1 million annuity without it.
Well,
It's not
and
what something costs you; it's what it costs you to not do something.
Well, and that's a topic that I really want to cover more of in the future, and I think you do too. And that is, if you don't look at software tools or any tool as a operational expense for your business and the return on investment, if you don't see every dollar you spend and compare the ROI, you're not a business person. And you have got to understand that being a sales professional is your business. It's just the same as being, having a law office is an attorney's business, or having an accounting office is a CPA's business. This is your business. And if you don't operate it as a business, if you don't keep an income and expense statement and a balance sheet, and if you don't measure every expense that you have for what return you get on it, then you're not a business person.
Right. I mean, you I think I've said this before. If I haven't, I'm going to say it now. So you're three people, right?
Yeah.
You're a salesperson, you're a consumer, and you better be a business person.
A business owner.
A business owner, yeah. So listen, it was great having everybody on here today. Dan, thanks a lot. It's always a great conversation.
It's a pleasure.
Just so that everybody knows, I just put our contact information on the screen there, so you can go to the website and reach out to us if you want to, if you have any questions. It would be great if you send us a question. Both our email addresses are in there. It'd be great if you send us a question. We'll put your question up on here next time. And I'm going to reach out to Tim and see if we can get him on here to talk about what problems advisors have in using a software and what they should expect from software. So I'll throw it to you. Any parting words? Where are you going to be next
No,
week?
I enjoyed the give and take. I think illustration software is a critical sales tool, and if you're not using it, you're playing with one hand behind your back. So you've got to do it. But there's a lot of bad software out there, and you really need to find the good software that sells for you.
Where are you going to be next week?
Actually, I'm going to still be here in Missouri. So, yeah. So, I'll be back in Puerto Rico the week after.
All right, man. Thanks a lot.